Hey everybody, thanks for checking out this video today. This video is a video setting up an experiment, um, and we're trying to figure out what situation, what conditions will be best to grow mold. Um, that's what we're trying to figure out, the problem we're trying to solve. So let's talk for a minute about the variables we're going to need to control with this particular experiment. So we're going to be growing mold on pieces of bread. So one of the things you want to make sure is that the bread you use is all from the same package, right? You don't want to use one piece of bread that's from the end of one package that you bought a week ago and you open a brand new package and use another piece of bread. Um, you just want to make sure they're from the same package. That means they're as it's no difference in age between the two slices of bread because over time that's when mold will grow. So you want to make sure that's one thing you control. You want to make sure that each piece of bread that you use is about the same size. It doesn't have to be perfect. So what I did, I cut a piece of bread into four small slices, right? And each one of these um, quarters of a piece of bread will be part of the experiment. So you don't need a whole slice of bread in each plastic bag. You just need, something about this size. So I'm going to do two trials, right? So every trial, every chance to run the experiment, that's the trial, we'll need four pieces of bread. So not four slices. So I'm going to use four of these or one slice of bread per trial. You'll see how it's set up in a second, right? You don't have to do more than one trial on this one. I know in previous videos I had said you should really do more than one trial when running an experiment, but since we're using food here and we don't want to be wasteful, um, what you can do is count my two trials as part of your experiment, right? If you set this up. So we'll count your one trial and my two trials. I'm going to do two trials here um, together as three trials. And, I'll do a video later on once the experiment is done looking at the results. And then you can compare what happened to your trial compared to my two, and it'll be like one large experiment. All right. Another variable that you might want to control is you want to make sure that you don't handle one of the slices of bread a whole lot more than the others. It's okay that you touch them. That's what you're going to have to. I don't need you to use rubber gloves or anything like that. But don't play patty cake with one for 5 minutes and use that and then just barely touch another one. Just when you touch them, you pick them up, you do what you need to do with them, put them in the plastic bag that's labeled, and that'll be good. So just want to make sure that you don't touch one more than the other. And maybe the last thing is some of these little pieces of bread are going to be wet, right? We need to moisten them a little bit. I'm going to use a little spray bottle, and I'm going to make sure whatever I decide, probably like two little pumps, like right, two little pumps on each piece of bread. I don't want one to be soaking wet and one to be barely wet. You want to use about the same amount of water. As long as I'm mentioning that, if you don't have a spray bottle, just get yourself a little bowl with some water in it, right? And you can dip your fingers in and just flick. That's how much water you really need. Maybe do that two or three times. Just that many little droplets of water on the wet bread. And just that you, and like I said, the variable you're controlling there is the amount of water. You don't want one soaking wet and one very dry or barely wet. So materials for this, right? And you can stop this video anytime and go get what you need if you want to set this up as I'm doing it, or you can watch the whole thing and then go back and set it up either way. So you'll need what, I don't know, I guess I'll call 4 chunks of bread per trial, right? And since I cut them into fourths, I'm using one slice. So I'm going to end up using 2 slices of bread, and I'm going to divide it up into, each slice is going to be cut into 4 little pieces, and those 4 pieces will be one trial. And I'm going to have 2 trials set up here. So you'll need a little bit of water, like I said, either a little spray bottle. If you're using a spray bottle, make sure it is just clean, pure water. Don't like dump out your mom's kitchen cleaner and fill it with water and then there's soap or bleach or some kind of cleaner mixed in there. Of course, that will have an effect on an experiment like this, right? And most of those cleaners are meant to kill mold or mildew or germs. So yeah, definitely make sure. This is just a little watering bottle that my family uses for small plants. So I know it's just clean water. Might be best if you just use a little bowl in the finger dip and flick method, right? Um, so you'll need that bread, you'll need water, maybe a bowl, and you'll definitely need little Ziploc bags. So I'm going to be using snack bags, and you'll need 4 bags per trial. So if you do one trial with one slice of bread cut into 4 pieces, you'll just need 4 of these bags. Set over here, I have 8 of those bags because I'm going to do 2 trials, right? I'm going to do 2 trials, so I need 8 bags. And you can use a bigger bag, you can use a smaller bag, as long as the bread you're using fits, right? You don't want to crumple it up into a little ball and jam it in there. You want it nice and flat. So that's really all you need. Maybe a marker to label. You might want to label those bags for sure. You're not going to be able to see it. It's backwards here, but I have one of them labeled wet and light, right? The word wet will be in the light, and one labeled wet that will be kept in the dark. And then if you could guess, piece of bread that's dry and kept in the light, and a piece of bread that's dry and kept in the dark, right? So I kind of gave away the secret. Those are our 4 conditions, right? Wet and dry, light and dark. Okay, those are the 4 conditions we're testing. So let's talk about the scientific method for a minute. So if you're going to write this up, and boy, would that be great if you wrote this up and maybe emailed it to me or something like that. That'd be great. Step 1, 2, and 3, you want to complete those steps before the experiment is running, okay? If you remember that from that first video, step 1 is the question, right? So I'm going to give you the question, and this can be varied, it can be, the words can be changed as long as it's basically asking the same thing. So the question should be something like, where will mold grow best? Dry and dark, dry and light, moist or wet and dark, or wet and light, right? That's the question. Where will mold grow the best? Where it's wet, where it's dry, where it's light, where it's dark. That's why we're going to have those 4 conditions, okay? Step 2, really important. I know this is the one that kids just completely blow off or forget about, that background information. Background information is extremely important. Stop the video, do a little research, look up a mold, look up some information, right? Ask somebody. Go look in the bread box right now in your kitchen and see if there's anything growing mold right now. Get some background information on this before you try step 3, all right? And of course, step 3 is your hypothesis. What is your guess? Now, again, if you're not writing this up to show me and to turn in, at least in your brain, get a hypothesis, right? What do you think is going to happen? Because that's what we're proving here. You make a guess based on your background information. We run the experiment and we get to see what really happens. And it either proves you correct or it proves that you were wrong. Like if we were back in school and we did this experiment, you'd be writing it up, you'd turn it in the write-up, and nobody who got it wrong would get a lesser grade than somebody who made their guess correctly, right? That's not what it's about. I wouldn't grade you on whether or not you know enough about this topic to answer the question. The grade would be based on did you run the experiment correctly and either prove yourself right or wrong, right? That's the important thing. I'd even say getting it wrong might be more valuable, right? I mean, you really learn something when you thought one thing and the real life experience proved it did something else. I mean, that might be even more valuable and better than already knowing the answer. All right, so the next couple of steps, materials we talked about, and of course, the procedure would be step-by-step directions, and we're not going to write those out, right? You might write them out if you write this up, but we're not going to talk about that right now. We're just going to get this experiment set up, right? So one thing I want to mention, you need a place to put these little slices of bread, right? I'm going to use a box like this, just a little cardboard box, for the dark. So once I spray the 2 pieces of bread and put it in the labeled bags, and I put the 2 dry pieces of bread in the 2 labeled bags that are dark, because remember, I'm doing 2 trials, I'm going to put them in this box, and I'm not going to open this box again for like a week, right? I'm going to let this go for a good 7 days before I make an observation and write down what I see. And then every couple of days after that, once I start to see some growth, like if I see a little bit of mold growing, I might check every day or so. But for now, I'm going to set it up, put the ones in the dark, and I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to check it, or I'm not going to keep opening it and closing it and opening it and closing it, right? The other ones, the ones that need light, I would put them somewhere where there's some nice natural lights, right? Maybe on the windowsill in the kitchen. I mean, keep in mind, those pieces of bread that are in the light, they're going to be in the dark at some point, most likely, right? Like I'm going to put mine on a windowsill in the kitchen, and when it gets dark at night, they're going to be in the dark. That's okay. I mean, that's just as long as they're all in the dark, right? You don't keep some of the ones in the light always in the light, and some of them in the dark when it gets dark. Just that's another variable. Keep everything the same as much as you can, um, and that you get your best results in any experiment. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to get my 2 bags that say wet, and I have 4. Remember, I'm doing 2 trials, all right? So I have 4 bags that have the word wet written on them, which means I'm going to need 4 pieces of bread with wet. So what I'm going to do, I'll show you right now. I'm going to take this little spray bottle. I'm going to give it 1, 2, 3, 4. I missed one of them. So 4 little sprays, and I'm going to put it right, that kind of wet on one side, and I'm going to put it in the bag, and I'm going to seal it up. So now I got one of them that are supposed to be wet right here. I'm going to pause this for a second, all right, and I'm going to get the rest of them in there. I'm not going to waste your time with each one, but I'll get the rest of them in there, and I'll start recording after that. Okay, so I have my 4 slices of bread in the 4 bags that were supposed to be wet. And here's another thing I just thought of. You don't want to dip the bread into a bucket or a bowl of water. You don't want that thing like a sponge dripping. It's just going to fall apart and be a mess, right? You can see it here. You just want it to be, you can't even see that it's wet, but it is, right? There's a nice little coating of moisture on the surface of that bread. And 2 of these, because I'm doing 2 trials, I'm going to keep saying that. 2 of these have the word dark written on them. Okay, I know it's backwards, but these are wet and dark. So I'm going to put those in my box right away. Okay, I'm going to put those in there. Wet side up. Right. And now that's all set. Those 2 wet with dark are in there, and I'm going to be checking those out in about a week. Now, keep in mind, we're also doing dry in the light and dry in the dark, right? So right now I'm going to find my 2 bags that have dry and dark and zip those up also right away. Here we go. Remember, 2 trials. So both of these say dry and dark. I'm going to get those in that box. And since these are in the dark anyway, it doesn't matter if one is on top of the other, right? They're in the dark, they're in a bag, they're not going to interact with one another, and one's not blocking the light of another. So it doesn't matter if they're in this little box and they're kind of stacked up on one another. 2 of them are wet and 2 of them are dry, and they are now in the dark. All right. I still have my 2 in the bag that say wet and light, which is good. I'm going to put these on a windowsill in a minute. Last thing I have to do is get my 2 that are dry in the bags to keep in the light. Now remember, I hope you're getting this. If you're just doing one trial, right, you just need 4 little pieces of bread, 4 bags, right, and you'll have one of each. One that's wet in the dark, one that's wet in the light, one that's dry in the dark, and one that's dry in the light. Okay? All right, so these are all sealed up. So these are the 2 trials worth, wet and dry, that are going to be up in the light. And what I'll do when we're done here is I'm going to take them upstairs and put them on the kitchen windowsill where no one's going to mess with them, or maybe in the dining room, and they'll sit there. And I might, take a glance at those, but it's okay. You can look at those as often as you want because you're not having to change the condition, right? If I want to look at these, I got to take them out of the dark, and I don't want to do that unless I have to. So I'm just going to leave them in there, right? All right. So I have all my 2 trials are set up. They're in the bags, they're labeled, and now they're ready to just get set out. If we were writing this up, okay, next step would be to make a list of materials, and you can see what we used. And you would write out a nice procedure, right, step by step. That's often the trickiest. You really got to think about what we just did and think of a good way to write that out so somebody else could do this experiment and get the same results as you and check your results by getting the same results. All right, I think that's it. We are ready to go. I do want to mention, if you watch the other videos, we did an experiment on sublimation, okay? And I put an ice cube about 2 weeks ago into the freezer. I measured it and I weighed it, so I know how big and heavy that ice cube was. And if you remember, sublimation is when a solid piece of ice goes from solid to gas and it skips liquid. So what I'd be looking for, I'm not doing it yet. I'm going to give that thing some more time. When I do take it out of that freezer and weigh it and measure it, I would expect it to be smaller if it has lost some of those water molecules, even as a piece of ice without melting and going directly to water vapor. All right, and if you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, go back a couple of videos, or maybe the last one, I forget, and it was an experiment set up on sublimation, and you can catch up on that one if you haven't watched that one yet. All right, I don't think I forgot anything. I hope I didn't. If I did, or if you have any questions, just put them in the comments of this video and I can answer them. Or, most of you that are watching this are my students. You could always email me or bring it up during one of our Zoom meetings, especially on Tuesday when we're doing the math one. Other than that, thanks for watching. And again, if you have any questions, please figure out a way to ask either in the comments or send me an email, because I'm no expert at this. Making these videos, I could have easily forgotten something or skipped over something. So hopefully I didn't. All right, guys, thanks a lot, and we will see you next time.